All right, everyone. Welcome to USA Rugby's Rugby University webinar series. We're going to go ahead and get started here. So, first up, we have Kurt Weaver presenting on the Big Five of refereeing. Before Kurt gets started, I just wanted to let everyone know if you do have any questions during the presentations, please feel free to send them to any of the USA Rugby organizer. On the chat function. Once we see your question, I will interrupt Kurt when necessary and ask your question for you, or we'll chat back as soon as we get a chance. So, again, if you do have a question, please just use the chat function and chat USA Rugby. All right, so we're going to switch it over to Kurt here. All right, Kurt, you should be all set. So go ahead and share your screen when you're ready.
I'm on. All right, Brandy, are we loud and clear? Can you hear me? All right. So, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for taking time today. I am going to be going through some best practices here in rugby refereeing and the Big Five presentation as well. Want to be able to field questions about the presentation because I know there's a lot of information in here. But the first part of the presentation will be about what resources are available. And I want to be able to show you clearly what's available right now out there on our website, all for free, that referees and coaches and players can take advantage of. So let me just get started here without further ado. Make sure I understand what I'm doing here on my computer. Okay. Should work. So first thing, of course, the game. The game has changed, and we were actually in the office watching the other day the 1999 World Cup where the U.S. played Ireland. We were watching, of course, because that was Brian O'Driscoll's first try in an international match, but watching the game at that point and how different that game looks as opposed to then the game today is pretty amazing. So being able to see how quickly the game is progressing, we're not quite to the point where we are texting players in the field, but we are getting more technologically advanced, and the game is getting quicker and different. And there are many ways to then be able to stay current on what's going on, what resources are out there for you, and then as well how you prepare yourself for Saturday's match. So wanted to talk a little bit about that and what resources we have on our USA Rugby website for those kind of things. As well, I want to encourage everybody, if you're a referee or if you're an administrator, to attend teams practices. It's a great way to see what coaches are coaching. And then, of course, conversely, coaches, I would definitely suggest you to attend referee meetings. What are the referees doing to calibrate? What are they talking about? It's a conversation that doesn't happen enough. We have a lot of folks that would benefit from being able to share that information back and forth. As well, then fitness, of course. Fitness is the new hot item, but certainly with the game at the speed it's going today, fitness has become a much more important part of it for referees to be able to play or to referee it and players to be able to play it. So that's what the second half of today's presentation is going to be all about. Wanted to go over what resources were available for you. Of course, USA Rugby University, you know about because you're on the call right now, but USA Rugby University will have our monthly webinar call. As well, USA Rugby University is not just these webinar calls. It's going to be more in-person courses that are available to you. It's going to be lots of good information that's put out like in manual form. The Scrum Lab is now up on the website, and it's a good resource for both referees, players, and coaches to be able to see what's going on with the Scrum. And then as well, if you have other requests as to what USA Rugby University should have up, we'd love to be able to hear about it. Second thing, the high school game management guidelines and the game management guidelines in general. These are a great resource for us to be able to use, see how the game should flow. So not so much around the law, but how that law would be interpreted. And the game management guidelines are a great resource to be able to put out there to show especially things like the breakdown, that all-important area, new advances in the Scrum and how those things should be dealt with. And then, of course, anything else that might come along in new or different law or interpretation. Our national panel manager, Richard Every, covers those in his game management guideline document each year. Continuing education courses, this is something that is available to everybody. If you ever need or want a continuing education course, It could be something as simple as we get together and chat about a game film, or it could be something more structured where a USA Rugby or a union representative comes out to your team or your club or your organization and speaks on a certain subject. Our coaching department already does this with like Luke Gross and his lineout. We do this Big Five presentation for referees around the country. And so please let us know what continuing education courses you would like to see in your neighborhood, because we could definitely get out there and share those. The referee resources page in Facebook. So I want to show you real quickly what is available to you here. The referee resources page on the interweb. So if you go to the internet here and you can find the USA Rugby web page, and you will find, let me zoom in here. Here we go. On the referee tab, as you then scroll over it, the resources tab comes up. I want to be able to show you all the free and amazing resources that they have on the website. There's a lot of great courses on here. There's a lot of information that is on here that you may not know. And so as you scroll through here, there is all the resources for a game, match score forms, competition and disciplinary forms, subcards, all that kind of stuff is up on here. But then in addition to that, if you'd like a level 1 course or you'd like to be able to host one of those, all those are here. And then, of course, the referee educational videos. These are amazing videos that are put together mostly by Mike Cobb and Mark Nelson, some other folks that are our education training folks for the referees. This last one, the Tackle Contest Zone referee training video, is a great training video for players, coaches, and referees alike. This is an amazing description of the tackle contest area, not just the tackle, not just the ruck, but the contest area around that, and what the parameters are, and how those should be refereed and administrated. So take your time, watch these videos. This one's about 15 minutes, but they vary in length. And of course, you scroll down here, there's all kinds of international education resources from the IRB and other items, referee best practices, and then down here, there's a checklist for referees. It's downloadable. Drop it on your iPod or your iPad and listen to it on the way to a game. It's a great way to just refresh around these parts of the game and what your checklist may be. It's free again, and make sure that you can download that and listen to it. I will apologize for the person who recorded it. It's me, and it sounds kind of funny, but good resources anyway. All right. The last thing I have on here is watch rugby. I think that the most important thing we can do right now to keep yourself current is to watch rugby. YouTube is full of stuff. I know it may not be completely 100% licensed, but YouTube has all the Super 15 stuff from the Southern Hemisphere, a lot of the Aviva and the Heineken Cup stuff from over in the UK. Just watch rugby. It's a great way to, as a referee, watch a speed of rugby that's probably above what we get domestically, and to try to keep up with that speed with calls and seeing what's going on. For players and coaches, it's a great way to stay current on what's being taught internationally, and I just can't say enough. If you ever need links to great games, let us know, and we can send out some of our favorites. Self-evaluation, want to make sure that's part of your overall refereeing and your structure that you have there. I know that players will do self-evals as part of the development process for a player. Referees just as important to get through and get your self-evals done to be able to see where you are throughout a season. If there's nagging items that are week-to-week problems, it's good to be able to put them down in self-eval sheet to be able to know what to fix moving forward. All right, so the big 5 focus areas. On to the actual presentation. First, I guess I'll quickly introduce myself. So my name is Kurt Weaver. I'm the Youth and High School Director for USA Rugby. And then in my free time, I referee as well, like many of you. I'm on the national panel as one of our referees and have lately been presenting this session around the country as we're traveling to our national events. It's been a great course to be able to go through, and just a refresher on 5 big items around the game. Certainly, this is not the only 5 things that happen in rugby, but as we see things throughout the course of the game that are impactful on the overall flow of it, the scores, the fun to watch and to play it, these 5 items have a lot to do with that. So as you might have guessed, number 1 as we go through the big 5 here is, of course, the tackle. So the tackle is the latest thing. It's the hot item. It is I know, sometimes confusing area of the game. We're going to go through some of the law around the tackle and show a little bit of video. around that to be able to help you out with the tackle. We also then, of course, have the scrum. So the scrum, this ever-evolving, ever-changing thing that at some point will land on a structured set of rules that don't move over the course of a couple years. But the new stuff has been interesting to referee. I'm sure it's been interesting to coach and to play as well. But I think it's been good. We've seen improvements in the way that scrummaging has gone. We see a lot less resets, and we see, I think, a hopefully safer environment for players to be able to play within. The maul. So this is something that has, of course, come back into style after being gone for a good long time. So in addition to having to relearn the dark arts, those front row scrum things, we are having to relearn the maul and what it means as a referee, as well then players and coaches. I have definitely seen some games where the maul has come back and the other team has not yet covered that in practice, and they weren't quite sure what to do. So the maul coming back into play will be a big focus area for us. Offside at breakdowns. Breakdown offside is one of those key items to get a game flowing. We like to tell people that if it's 0-0 at halftime, watch your offside at the breakdowns. It could mean that there's amazing defense on both sides, but it could also mean that you're not pushing people back far enough at those offside at breakdown times. So making sure, especially those inside players, are onside behind that last foot, and then the outside players as well. So we'll get into that today. And finally, we have offside kicks. So offside kicks is, it may not seem like a massive impact on the game. I think internationally it maybe has a little more impact than what we see in our domestic game, but certainly it does have effect. And when you see the new rule and law around it, you might be able to see how your team can better adapt to it. So right into the tackle. The tackle, of course, always fun. It's good to be able to, I guess, relearn what it means to have a tackle first, and to get into the definitions of that for referees' sake as well as for players' sake. It's good to be able to reward the positive play, and of course, we want to be able to ensure the fair contest for both teams to be able to have a good crack at possession. I think the key analysis around here, and there's been a lot of question lately about tackler assist differences. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But of course, the first thing is, did we have a tackle? And definition of the tackle, it's going to mean that a ball carrier was running down the field, they got grasped onto by an opponent and brought to ground. And of course, to ground means at least a knee hitting, and then a knee and anywhere up on the body hitting that ground is going to constitute that tackle. And so that gets us then into that tackle law. We like to say that we go from different buckets of law. So from open play bucket, we hop into the tackle bucket. It's going to have some special law around that. As soon as we've identified that there is a tackle, then we hop into what is the obligation around that tackle. So first thing, of course, we're going to see the tackler. In order to have a tackler in a tackle, that tackler must have gone to ground. You can have a tackle without a player going to ground and being a tackler. That person on the feet would then be called the tackle assist. And so we want to be able to identify clearly when there is a tackler or a tackle assist, two very different positions on the field in that tackle. So the first scenario we're going to talk about is when there's a tackle with a tackler. So that means the tackler has gone to ground and at least their knee has hit and they have gone down to ground with that ball carrier. The very first thing that has to happen in the tackle is that they're going to have to release and get away. So the tackler is going to have to release the ball carrier and the ball, and they're going to have to get out of the way of that ball being played to that ball carrier's team. Sometimes that means to roll and hop over the body and roll away. Sometimes it means to roll up the side. What it doesn't mean is to roll back toward the offense. When you roll back toward the offense, then you're in the way of arriving players, and it's going to be likely a penalty against the assist tacklers. Then equally are going to have to, the first thing in a tackle that they will have to do when they're up on their feet is that they're going to have to release the ball and get away. So if they are on their feet, release the ball carrier and the ball, show a clear release before anything else is allowed to happen. All right, the second thing that's going to happen, the tackled player, the ball carrier, they're going to have to pass, place, or play it. And that means that they're going to be able to set the ball back toward their own team. they're going to be able to pass it to a teammate within a reasonable amount of time, or they're going to be able to place it, and that's going to be back likely toward their own team. What this means is that we're not giving them the full time to be able to do it. We are not giving them the full obligation to do it, but we have to give them the opportunity to be able to pass, place, or play that ball. If they don't pass, place, or play it within a reasonable amount of time, of course, they are liable for penalty. So first we had the tackler release and away. Second, we had the tackled player release that ball, play, pass, or place it. And then, of course, the third thing is the arriving players. Arriving players must come in through what is called the gate. The gate, of course, being two different poles on either side of that tackle that players must enter through. If you think about a wall on either side of the tackle that is parallel to the touch line, that would give you then a nice little hallway to walk through over that tackle. If players try to come inside, they'd hit the brick wall. And any player that would have hit that brick wall, you want to be able to penalize those players for coming in through the side. We want them through the gate, through the back, on their own team side. As well, when those players are entering that tackle area, we want to make sure that they are on their feet, actually attempting to either play the ball or ruck. We don't want them coming in negatively. We like to say that if they look like a plane crashing, eagle, they should be looking like they're coming in, flat backs, shoulders and hips even, not shoulders below hips. And of course, then if they're on defense, they're making an honest attempt to play for the ball or to ruck, not to simply just go to ground and cover up the ball. So we have a couple of clips here to show you about the tackle. Get into the video. I'm going to be able to move my GoToWebinar item. Okay. So the first one we have here, I will show you. This is one of our tackle assists, not allowing the player to play the ball.
Which is always a dangerous thing to do. There's Chris Eaton, goes for a little dab, but that's closed down very quickly. Tackle assist.
So this is one where Brody Retallick was up on his feet. He was the tackler assist because he was on his feet, but he did not release that ball first before then going back into play it. So he has a hold of it here, down to ground, did not release before going back into play it. He's liable for penalty. This is one that Richard Every, our national panel manager, just did a great video about. That video is on the USA Rugby Referees Facebook page, and it's about 5 minutes worth of video about tackler assist. This is one that I think a lot of players get confused about. They said, but I was on my feet, but I got to play the ball. And of course, we have to ensure that they're clear release. Some people are saying, show us the hands or butterfly as a way to show that release before you go back in after it. Moving on here, next video.
It's a timing issue. That was a rush. You've got to make sure from now on.
So this one, Wayne Barnes here calls this as a ruck. He says that a ruck had formed and that the Argentinians had formed this ruck. And then, of course, the Australian player had popped up to play it. We'll see it here on the replay when he pops back up. So there's the tackler. He goes to ground. The ball carrier goes to ground. The arriving players come over the top. He pops back up to play the ball illegally. It is a debate, of course, whether a ruck was formed there or not, but let's call it as a ruck. Let's say there was a ruck clearly formed. That ball carrier had to release and get away, and after that ruck had formed, no more hands in, of course, no more playing in there. So the Australian player liable for a penalty in that situation. So now we can look at arriving players. See here some great examples of side entry. And there he is. So Clearly, if there was a brick wall there on the side, he would have come right through the wall and would have been stopped. But of course, we want them coming back around and through their own gate. So we'll see that one more time just so you can see it. Great example of through that side. All right. And we have, of course, body angles. So watch the Welsh player here. Right down, planes crashing. They'll show it again here. Body angle straight down and off the feet.
Well, Will's keeping the ball for the first time. It was the first real passage the player they've had to put together. But actually, leaving the penalty aside there, not looking at that, they've come back. There is going to be, if it continues, a significant defect in the Australian defence because in the middle there.
And then straight down. Of course, any kind of contact down there on the player on the ground or hands on the ground, that player will be counted as off their feet. Okay, I believe that is one more here. Okay, so moving on. Oh. All right, so moving into the maul. Tackle area, of course, is a wildly confusing one. If there's any questions you have about any of the information, please go ahead and type into Brandy. It's a lot of information, but the tackle being a very key area. There's a term going around right now, lightning quick ball, and we want to be able to produce lightning quick ball for the players to be able to play, and that happens a lot when you can get that tackler or tackle assist release of the ball, and then get that ball carrier releasing the ball very quickly, allowing for the team to be able to recycle and play ball very quickly. That's sort of our goal as referees, is to get that breakdown area moving and to keep it organized. Of course, we want to allow a defense to be able to compete for it when they have rights to it, but as well, we want to make sure that the obligation is first to the defense to release, then it is to the, and then it is for arriving players to contest for the ball. And that is the order in which we see things. So the tackle developing into a maul, every once in a while here the tackle comes in, clear and obvious maul will develop and the referee will referee this phase accordingly. So of course a tackle, as players will enter into contact standing up, we will see some mauls develop out of this, the maul being a old tool coming back into the game. We've seen a lot more mauling, not just like the international folks are doing it, but we're also seeing rolling mauls in several different teams. And so it's a great area of the game to refresh ourselves on. We're going to get into here a little bit about the actual administration of the maul. So what constitutes a maul is going to be a defensive player grasping onto the ball carrier. In doing so, they're going to then stop usually the momentum of the ball carrier. And as soon as we then have one more offensive player, one more of the ball carrier's team that binds on to them in a way as to which to drive or to bring them to ground, then we have that maul. So as soon as we have one defender, we have one ball carrier, and one more of the ball carrier's team bound into that, that is a maul. You could potentially have 5, 6, 7 defenders trying to tackle one ball carrier on their feet, and that is still not a maul until you get one additional offensive player bound onto that situation, and that's when the maul would be in the situation. So of course we want to be able to get the maul going and being a positive tool for those teams to be able to use. First thing we're going to look for is the arriving players. Are the arriving players going to arrive through their own side? Are they going to then bind onto the maul in a positive way? Once you know that a maul has been called, some best practices around this. I apologize, I'm going to flip back and forth between screens here. The best practice you can have here is to call maul. Know, and especially those scrum halves are going to want to know that it is a maul. You've seen it, you've identified it. The team in possession of the ball is likely going to want to get the maul moving because they know it's a use it or lose it kind of situation. When the maul is moving, you want to be able to administrate it to keep players behind the last foot who are not involved in the maul. and players who are entering the maul to be entering through their own team's side, basically through a maul gate that is created on that side. Players cannot come through the side, cannot enter the side just like a ruck. Players can't come around the back. Players cannot lift a leg in there. Players cannot bring it down. Players cannot fall to ground and try to then topple it over. Those are all very dangerous and should be penalized. Once the maul gets up and moving, it is a positive thing to keep it moving. If it's going to stall and stop, you'll announce use it or that's once. When you announce that's once, you're announcing that to the scrum half, most likely, to let them know that's their one shot to then either get it moving again or then the 5 count starts for them to use it or lose it. If they get it moving again, the count goes off and the maul can keep moving until it stops. If it stops a second time, you start the countdown from 5 and they have to use it within that time. If for some reason after that first stoppage they can't get it moving again and you count down from 5 and they can't use the ball, it's going to be turnover scrum to the other team. If the maul ends unsuccessfully, meaning if the maul is going to be toppled over by no infringement of the defense, maybe just by momentum, this is something that we need to clarify. If I am a defender and I'm on my feet and I have tackled or wrapped up a ball carrier and I've wrapped up man and ball, toppled over, and a maul's been called, I have no obligation to release that ball carrier and roll away. A maul does not turn into a ruck once it goes to ground. So there's no obligation for that player to release and roll away. There is an obligation for the ball carrier's team, the offense, to produce the ball immediately. And if they can produce it immediately, then they will get the ball to be able to be used. If they can't produce it immediately, it's whistle and turnover scrum. A lot of times we hear referees, as soon as the maul goes down, they'll start yelling, release and roll away, which is incorrect. We need to be able to allow those defensive players to have rights to that ball just like the offense would. Don't let it linger too long in there. Of course, it's a safety area. You just award turnover ball if the ball is not being produced immediately. So we have a quick video here. I want to show you what it means, how quickly 5 seconds goes. It is something that we don't always realize just how long 5 seconds is. A lot of people give the whistle a little early on how long 5 seconds would be on a stalled maul. I want to show you here Craig Joubert and his interpretation.
Raise that at the front of the Sharks lineup to set them all.
There's his use it once. Wasn't moving, so he had his use it once.
But still the Sharks managed to build a little bit of momentum. And the Stormers holding.
This is great. You can actually hear the discussion between.
That's a good point. 5 seconds is quite a long time, but it's a good point.
So Craig Joubert came back and said if the maul was going sideways, and you can see how the maul ends up going sideways here for a good long time. And the point was that's not advancing. Sideways is not advancing, and the 5 seconds would actually be counting here. He ended up calling it as a collapse maul because the blue team ended up pulling it under. But when the maul starts to go sideways, that is not positive movement. It's the same in your mind when you're counting to 5 as if the maul was stalled. Okay.
Hey, Kurt.
Back here.
Kurt.
Yes. Yes.
We have a question for you.
Sure.
Okay, the question is, we have been told that any time a ball carrier hits the ground, the tackler must release. I think that was on your previous year's slide.
Yes. So in a maul, it does not turn into a ruck or into a tackle. So and good question, Brady, thank you. So when a maul happens, it's not simply a maul moving into then a ruck or a tackle. It is an unsuccessful end to a maul. when a maul gets toppled over like that, or if the ball is produced immediately, a successful end to a maul. And so don't look at it. Don't hop out of the maul bucket of law into the tackle or into the ruck bucket of law, because it's not the same thing. Once you've called the maul, the ball has to be produced positively from the offensive team, or then it would be a turnover scrum. So if that goes over, if the maul gets driven and positively goes down, meaning just lost their feet because of momentum or is not brought down illegally, then those defenders or tacklers don't have to release. They don't have to release the ball carrier or the ball. They don't have an obligation to do so. And so don't count thing as a ruck or same thing as a tackle. And so you wouldn't vocalize then if you were the referee, you wouldn't vocalize release and roll away because they don't have an obligation to do so. And that's why it's so important to find the ball in a maul when you're a referee. Go and find the ball. If it's not on one side, bounce to the other side. If you don't see it, keep moving around until you find it, because you want to be able to identify, is it tied up in there or is it at the back being ready to be used? And if it's tied up in there, it's likely not going to come very quickly in case of a maul going to ground. If it's right at the back, there it is. It's ready to be played. Play on. Good question, Brady. Thank you.
We had a follow-up as well.
Sure.
All right, so the question is, it seems as if coaches are more aware of that law than U19 refs are. How can we handle that?
Well, I think that's the age-old question, right? So in case the referee is not familiar, what I would say is the best thing you do is refer them to this resource, and that way they can listen to the resource and listen to the video as well. I guess working with the referee society and working with your local referees is not a one-way traffic thing. You all go out, coaches and players go out and practice Tuesday, Thursday every week. You're working on stuff. It's the same thing with the referees. And so to be able to work with the referees, do you watch video with the referees? Do you invite them to practices? Do you engage them in a conversation, not just after a game, after a bad call, but do you engage them midweek in conversation? If mauling is your thing and you want to, and you're a great mauling team, and you want to make sure it's refereed correctly, I would check in with the ref midweek before your game and say, hey, ref, just want to chat with you about the mauls. It's something that we're really working on. Let's see how we can do this. I've had some great conversations with coaches midweek, and I know they're prepping me for the weekend. I know they're trying to then, get this super amazing play, through, see what I'm going to be looking at. But that's fine. It's a good conversation to have, and to be able to know what we can anticipate on the weekend, and as well, that coach knows how to anticipate what the referee is going to call. Good question.
Kurt, it looks like we have two more here. Do you have time to answer them?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Next question is, if a ball carrier never has an offensive teammate join but is held up by defense, it is not a maul. So how can that situation resolve itself?
So this has been a lively topic of debate lately. The answer is the ball carrier will likely fight to go forward, and the defender is going to fight to stop them. If the defender can keep the ball carrier on the feet and they are both just standing up on their feet and they're both just wrestling for the ball, you play on. There's no resolution to come out of that except to just play on and see what happens. If the ball carrier can get themselves to ground, then you're going to release and you're going to roll away, and the same kind of things you do as an obligation to tackle. But likely, if that ball carrier is going to be stood up, their support is going to come, and there's going to be a maul, and the ball's not going to come out, and it's going to be turnover scrum. You'll very rarely see a time when two players will just stand there wrestling for a ball on their feet and nothing come out of it. So you just take a breath, take a beat, let the players figure it out for you, and then you'll call it as you see it. The discussion that's happened lately on the USA referees page gets a little pedantic. We don't have to worry so much about it. It's likely going to resolve itself. Either the momentum and the drive of the ball carrier will topple it over, and then you're going to be into tackle law, or then there's going to be a maul formed, and it's going to be a turnover ball likely because the ball's not going to come out.
Thanks, Kurt. And then there's just some clarifying questions as well.
Sure.
The next one is, if the ball is not deemed playable, then the referee is not obliged to call use it and allow 5 seconds. Is that correct?
Correct. So if the maul goes to ground, they have to use it immediately. There's not a 5-second count there. If the maul's up on the feet and the ball's just stuck in the middle and the maul stalls, that's when you use the 5 seconds. If the maul goes to ground and the ball's not immediately available, and by immediately available, of course, you want to be reasonable, but if you don't identify the ball is there and it's going to come out immediately, then you'd call turnover ball immediately. What it ends up being is a safety situation. You don't want to let players wrestle on the bottom of a pile for 5 seconds.
All right, thanks. That's all the questions for now.
Great. All right, we'll keep rolling here. So on to the Scrum fun. This is, of course, a new and different hot topic, but of course, the Scrum being a safety area and a massive focus area for us recently because of law changes, it is definitely good to refresh yourself on what's going on in the Scrum. There's a couple great videos out there the IRB has done about the Scrum and about what the new stuff is. There's as well then a USA Rugby video that's out there about it, and then I'm going to show you a quick video on the Scrum as well. So we'll start off with the video because it's good to watch.
Okay, lads, for Scrum, so the first thing I'll do, I'll make a mark on the pitch. Hooker, go to the left of the mark, please. Okay, when we're ready, I'll start to engage the Scrum. So first thing I'll call crouch. So we make sure we're at the same height and we're balanced. Once I'm happy that we're all balanced, I'll call bind. Props, make sure you bind in the right places on your opposite number and hold that bind. When all 4 props are bound and I'm happy that both packs are stationary and balanced, I will call set. Please make sure you engage the Scrum after I've said set. Once the Scrum's engaged, we need it to be stationary and square, and then we can put the ball in.
All right, so there it is. Nice and easy, right? So the new stuff with the Scrum, I think it's key to be able to go through what maybe the referees are thinking in their brains and what we should be looking for. And as well, then this can work really great for coaches and players to be able to administrate that on the field. First thing would be is that we need to make the mark and then have the hookers come up and their right feet should be on the mark, making them the right even distance for being left of the player across from them. So if both the players come up and they put their feet, and if you put your foot down, there should be a toe on either side of your foot, and those are the hooker's feet up there, right on your own foot as a referee. On here we say it's about 4 inches apart. That's a good distance because it's good to have that distance. That will then get them when they crouch in the right distance to be able to bind appropriately and be ear to ear. As you set the mark, you want to then be able to get out of the way as the referee so that the props can bind up correctly and you're not in there. But certainly you want to stay right there, right next to right next to the situation. With this then, as you set the mark and as the hookers get set in their places, you're going to be watching for them to bind up correctly. We want to be able to see that the front rows are binding on each other correctly. And then as you are ready and call crouch, they should come down to a place to where players are no further than temple to temple, but ear to ear is really what we're looking for. I know some teams are trying to get further apart and it just doesn't work. Ear to ear or temple to temple is as far as you should let players get apart. And this is any age. This is youth, high school, collegiate, and adult. If they get too far apart, there's no way they could actually bind together. And really what we want to have is a nice solid bind before we bring them in. So on crouch, you should see them come down in a place where they have flat backs and they're stable. You want to pause after you say crouch in order to see that they are stable, they're not falling forward. After you feel that they are in the right place, they're ear to ear with the players across from them, and they're not putting their head on the player across from them. You want to make sure there's no head contact there. That's unreasonable. A lot of them like to drive their heads into the person next to them there. Then you're going to call bind. When you call bind, you should see all 4 binds that actually take place. If you can't see all 4 binds from one side of the Scrum, it means they're not binding up on the back. And that's where all 4 front row players who are binding must bind, is up on the back. Not on the side, not in the armpit, not in the arm, but up around the back of the player across from them. This is a very important part of it. If you get them ear to ear and you have the binds up on the back, then you'll have a lot better the scrum as they come into set. You'll have a lot more driving straight and a lot less shenanigans in there. Next part is after you've called bind and you're comfortable that their binds are there, you can call set. On set, they'll come together. It shouldn't be a large distance, again, because they're likely ear to ear. And when they come together, then they should be remaining straight and stationary. The crouch, the bind, and the set should be said conversationally and not yelled. This is not something for everybody on the field to hear. You want to say it conversationally so that the players can hear you clearly, but you certainly don't need to yell it so that everybody in the field is going to hear. This is for those 6 front row players to be able to do it. As well as you say crouch, bind, and set, when you say crouch, you need to let the players crouch and you need to see it happen before you move on to bind. Same thing that at bind, you need to make sure they're binding and they're finished binding before you then move on to set. And then after set, you're going to let the scrum become stable and calm and static, and then we'll get the ball in. That will be either yes 9 for high school and youth players or a tap on the back for the collegiate and adult players. We're doing it differently right now for those 2 ages in America. That might change next season, but currently that's what we have. So for the collegiate and adult players, you're going to be tap on the back, or if you're across the scrum, it'll be a point at the scrum half. And then for the high school players, it's going to be yes 9. But you're not going to do this until things are stable. Do not let the 15-degree wheel happen before the ball goes in. If it does, reset it, come back in. As well, then, once you've said yes 9, you want to be able to see that ball goes in straight. And by straight, we mean a new version of straight, not the straight that's been the last 5 years straight, actually down the middle of that tunnel. Because with the new rules, we want to make sure that each team has a fair shot. All right, after the engagement, let me see here. Oh, sorry. Okay. After the engagement, you want to visually be able to check the props binds. For adult and collegiate teams, they are allowed to readjust their bind after the set, but only once. And that does not mean to drop it to an armpit, or somewhere where it shouldn't be. It just means to readjust your hand to be able to bind better in case you lost it in the impact. But of course, the longer the binds and up on the back, that's what we're looking for. Again, ball must be in straight. In exchange for moving the hit, we have to be able to give them that fair contest in there. Back rows, of course, have to stay bound. That they all know this, but they rarely do it. And then, of course, creating space for the 9. You want to be able to create space for the 9. The offside line for both 9s is their side of the ball. So the offensive 9 has to stay on his or her own side of the ball, just like the defensive 9 has to stay on his or her own side of the ball. So they shouldn't be back and forth. They shouldn't be bumping each other or pushing each other. They have to be on their own side of the ball and administrate that. Make sure that there's no shenanigans in there. Lastly, whip wheels are not something we should allow. The rule of thumb is that if you stuck a pin in the middle of the scrum and the scrum spun around that pin, that is a whip wheel. It's not moving forward at all. It's simply spinning on its axis. That means somebody's pulling and walking sideways and not actually driving straight, as you must do in a scrum. You want to reward good wheels, and that would mean the scrum is driven off the mark before it's driven around. But whip wheels is something you don't want to allow. To identify it and penalize it. All right. Any questions about the scrum before we move on here? This one. All right, we can roll forward. Although a complicated area, the scrum is, I guess, I really like the new rules.
We have a question.
I think it's a good thing. Oh, go ahead, Brandy.
Okay. The question is, we have been victim to uncontested scrums in every Matrix match this season due to our front row being too low, according to one ref and 2 coaches. Apparently, our low front row creates safety concerns for our opponent. We have been told that if we were a boys' team, this would be less of an issue. How do I adjust my coaching to match poorly coached scrums?
Well, I guess the first thing is that it shouldn't be any different for girls or guys. So I assume since we're since we said if you're a boys team, I really hope that we're not refereeing girls and guys differently, or that we're not necessarily coaching them different items. They're very able to do everything the same as boys and girls. So that'd be my first item, is to just sort of make the mental note for everybody that you shouldn't ever referee the game differently because it's girls on the field. If you've seen our national team play, they are a well-drilled and skilled organization that I think deserves the full brunt of the laws of the game. So that would be my first comment on that. I guess the other part of that would be you can be too low, and so I have seen coaches that have coached their teams to be super, super, super low, and that actually isn't too much of an advantage. I think Scrum is not ultra low. It's certainly low, but it's not something that is adversely low. And when I referee two scrums that are of different heights, it's not an obligation that one raises and one lowers. It's an obligation that they scrum at the same height. And although that sounds a little confusing, what I will say to the front rows is come up. You have to pick a height. You're probably going to have to come down. You're probably going to have to come up, but you're going to have to pick a height to scrum at. And one team being low doesn't mean the other team has to come down to match it. That's not how it works. The two teams have to meet in the middle to be able to scrum, just like anything else in the game. It's not about making one team come down or making another team come up. It's about meeting in the middle so that we can actually have a constructive scrum. And so I have met teams where their coaches have been great about getting them ultra low, but if the other team isn't either able or willing to come down to their level, we got to meet somewhere in the middle because we have to be able to have scrums. I think the other danger in that is low means one of two things in a danger area. It either means that their hips and your head, so your hips might be drastically below your shoulders, or conversely, your shoulders might be below your hips. And that's what we have to be able to stop. And so if for some reason your scrum drops and then drives up on the other scrum across from it, that's going to be a danger in a safety area. And so we'd have to be able to stop that and either manage it, penalize it, or then the last resort, of course, should be uncontested scrums. So I know I've probably not told you what you want to hear, but I think the answer is scrums have to meet in the middle, and the middle is the two teams you have in front of you's middle, not a middle that is prescribed for everybody. Is that any more questions there, Brandon? All right, we'll keep moving.
Nope, we're all good.
Okay, thanks. All right, so offside of the breakdowns. This is the next part of this. And feel free to ask questions about any part of the presentation as we roll here. So offside of the breakdowns, this is a key to truly getting the flow of the game going. When you see the video, you'll see maybe how small some of this looks, but how impactful it is on the game. A key thing that we need to identify as referees, and then I think as players, I talk to coaches and players a lot, and I guess I call this one sort of almost a dumb penalty, because the extra 6 inches that you get by being, that one step in front of the last foot likely isn't going to get you any kind of advantage. It actually may take away a little advantage because you didn't get some go forward in the defense. And so it's one of those things that I think we as, both players and coaches, and then as well as referees, can better manage as we're working our way through. But I think now that we're getting more assistant referees at games, they're being very helpful with getting teams back behind that last foot. As well, I think very well drilled teams are understanding that the last foot is not going to be a disadvantage, and they're playing it there. So we're getting less penalties at this, but certainly we need to make sure that we are vigilant on this. As a referee goes, your first focus will be that tackle and breakdown area. So as you see that third bullet point there, it's the ball availability. That's that part. Make sure the tackle is correct. Make sure that tackler's gotten out of there, the ball's being set. And then, of course, you start with the inside players from that breakdown. And the inside players would be some people call them pillars, some call them posts. Whatever that first player is off the breakdown is the first one you want to be able to set to get them onside, and get them out from them. We'll set off of them. And so wherever that first player sets, if they're setting halfway up the ruck, the entire the rest of the line is going to they're setting off of that person. So make sure you get those inside players back onto that last foot, and then move to the outside players. So first is the tackle, get that right. Second is those inside players. Third is the outside players. Mostly that means the backs, but the outside players. One key to this is that players that are down in the 3-point stance, the hand has to be back behind the last foot, not the feet and then lean forward on the hand so you're actually in front of the last foot. If a player goes down in 3-point stance, their hand on the ground has to be back behind that last foot. This is very, very important when you're around the try line because a lot of players are doing this. They'll hop down in the 3-point stance. That player's hand must be back on that try line if you're right up on the try line. So get those players back, including the hands on the ground, and get them onside behind that last foot. All right, we'll show some video here. This is actually some really good video about offside. Not this one. Okay, offside at Rucks. So not egregious. I think as you see this, they'll do it again in slow motion. Not egregious, right? Not up near the scrum half, but they're up just far enough to where the white team has to adjust what they're doing with the ball. And so that inside runner is going to come out definitely instead of maybe coming back inside. This one, the player in black is offside. He came up the side of that ruck. He actually then got out of the way. And so I'll show you this here. So this player right here is coming in from the side and is offside in front of that last foot. The referee definitely said something like, get out of the way. And he did. But then look what happens with coming in from this side. It gave him just enough time for this player to get back to his feet and to be able to play that ball and play that scrum half. So he then got back out. Referee said, no, don't do that. He hops out. But then watch, this player loads up and takes care of business. And so, of course, impactful. So this one, big number 3 in the way. So 3 blue, if you watch 3 blue right here, you can see offside, and then of course, who makes the tackle but 3 blue? It happens every time like that. 3 blue didn't get onside, and then of course there it is at the impact, 3 blue. This one again, not a whole lot of offside. They're not 3 or 4 steps in front. They're probably a step or 2. But I want you to see the difference then of what this yellow team attacks. These 2 players are offside, the blue players, and then the way that the yellow team is very different. And so this yellow team could have potentially gotten the ball another pass or 2 outside, but instead they were stuck, and they had to then be able to run it up into those blue players. So if you get those players back onside, it's going to be a drastic difference in the way the game flows. It's so much of a better game, and it'll flow so much better for you. As well, you will likely get increased scoring because players will get through that half gap a little easier, and then they will be able to offload and get the ball up and running. It's not, again, only an advantage to the offense. It's going to be something you want to be able to manage both sides of the ball, but certainly this is one that increases the amount of go-forward ball that offenses and ball carriers can take, and it's good for us. It makes the game a lot more flowing, a lot quicker, and offenses can actually run what they need to run. Any questions on that before we move on to the offside kicks? All right, so offside kicks, it's a key item, and again, not necessarily something you're going to see every week that's going to be very impactful in your game, but I think it's important to talk about players in front of the kicker. They must remain stationary, and so this is where referees need to get good at identifying the number and the color of the player that you're instructing. To just yell a generalized stop or halt or hold to the players who are advancing doesn't give a clear indication as to that team as to what's happening. Because maybe not all players in that team have to stop. It's only a player or 2 who might be in front of that kicker. So the checklist for a referee as the ball is spun back to a kicker would be view back the ball back to the kicker, view the kick, hold on the kicker an extra second to make sure there was no late charge or late tackle on the kicker, You're then going to view the players on either side of the kicker that were near that kicker to see if they were onside or not. Next, you're going to identify likely the pack members who are in front of the kicker. If they are advancing at all, you're going to pick a number and a color, tell them to stop or hold. And then once they've been passed by players onside, you can say onside or blue onside. And that way everybody knows they can then advance. The one nuance to this is the new part of it, which is any players from the kicker's team who are within 10 meters of where the ball will land are now offside and must retreat. They can't just hold where they are. They have to physically retreat themselves back 10 meters before they can do anything. And so this is one of those new, new advancement in the law, and it's something we need to be identified because you're not going to yell hold or stop to a player who's within 10 meters. You're actually going to yell retreat. And so you want to be able to identify those players who are within 10 of where the ball will land and give them a different command than just maybe the pack members who were in front of a kicker who you're telling to hold or to stop. And so it's very important to be able to identify the difference in those two and to get those players away from where the ball will land. It's something that has happened a lot, especially with kicks that go errant, or a scrum half kick that gets popped real high. A lot of times there's potentially lingering folks within that 10-meter area, and we need to get them back and out of the way. Okay, so offside kicks. Show this video, and then we'll get finished up here.
Thompson, Robertson, Webster in the back three. Gassier again, excellent. Edinburgh are all offside.
So that player was within 10 meters of where that ball landed, and that's why that player got penalized. So this is one, the ball went straight up, and when the ball goes straight up, likely somebody's going to be within that 10 meters. You need to be able to manage them and get them back. So you see that player didn't even do anything. They were just simply not retreating, and that player is still offside because they really did affect play. So again, a popped up ball, whenever it goes that high, likely all those players within 10 meters. You got to get them back, and you got to be able to call retreat instead of just stop or hold.
Still, time for that.
Advancing in front of the kick.
To change, moved this through again on James.
And within the 10.
But the referee will give a penalty for that. Clean catch from Jordan Murphy this time. Over from.
So in front of the kicker, the referee needed to pick out number and color to tell that player to retreat.
But the referee. 2, 4, 5, pick a number.
The reason that's so impactful is because the players then see, let's say, instead of seeing one ball chaser on the kicker's team coming at them, they could potentially see 3 to 4 tacklers coming at them. And that's very impactful as to whether a player will go left or will go right. And you want to be able to identify that that is impactful in the game. Although it doesn't look material because potentially the ball is going to land 20 or 30 meters down the field, it is material in how that team will play. And if there's 4 to 6 defenders running at them, that's going to affect how they're doing it instead of one chaser that got through. And so if those players did not retreat or at least did not hold until they were put on side, you want to make sure that's something you're going to manage as a referee. All right, so we have wrapped up here. Want to get through the last slide. Conclusions, the 5 focus areas of the game. I'm happy to give any more information about this. If you have any questions, we'd love to be able to address it. I know these are 5 big, complicated areas. We've covered them pretty quickly throughout this presentation. But we have a second one to get to. So I guess, Brandy, is there any final questions before we pass it off?
Yeah, Kurt, there's actually 2 questions. The first one is, you previously indicated if a maul goes to the ground, the defense does not have to release. Does that mean the defense can hold the man with the ball on the ground and prevent him from getting it to the scrum half?
Yes. So if they had a hold of him before they went down, then yes. So if they had man and ball or woman and ball and they were wrapped up as they were up, And a lot of times this happens, I see in I guess, younger rugby, just because there's a bigger kid and a smaller kid, and they wrap up the ball or the person, and then the maul ends up going to ground. There's no obligation for that tackler, or tackler is the wrong word because we're not going to a tackler. It's the defender who has man and ball wrapped up. There's no obligation for them to release or to roll away. They can hold on to that person to then wrap up the ball and then a ball.
Perfect. Thanks, Kurt. And just to
So
let everyone know, we will be uploading all of the videos as well as Kurt's presentation to the Rugby University page after the presentations are over. So you can feel free to review everything on that website.
Brandon, I was just going to say one more thing. That's why it's so important to be able to identify when a maul has occurred and when it has not occurred, because that's two very different things. If it's just four defenders that are wrapped onto a ball carrier and it goes to ground, they have to release and roll away. If it has turned into a maul, then then they don't have the obligation.
Perfect.
Thanks everybody. Kurt. Really appreciate it. Our information will be up there. Like I said, please feel free to drop us an email or a phone call or text message or carrier pigeon and answer any more questions you have.
All right. Thanks, Kurt. Now we're going to change things over to Justin Goonan and Tom Lyons. Justin, I'm going to go ahead and change the presenter over to you. Feel free to hit that show my screen button, and you can go ahead and get started whenever you're ready. Justin, I think you might be muted.
All right, can you hear me, Brandy?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. All right, well, thanks, Brandy. Thanks, Kurt, for that presentation. And yeah, so as Brandy said, I'll just be discussing creating the rugby student athlete and just kind of some of the specific areas that go into, you know, what it means or what it takes to be a dedicated rugby high school or collegiate level. I'm going to address this discussion in two different ways. The first half will be kind of focused on the player, some of their habits, some of their goals and objectives. The second half will kind of address it more from a coach's perspective as far as how you would structure team training sessions and how you can kind of incorporate some of these practices into a team setting. So just a few of the different areas that we'll discuss this evening. I just want to go ahead and say that I will not be discussing any nutrition items or nutrition tips. From what I understand, there's going to be another Rugby University presentation on nutrition later in the year, so I'll leave that to those professionals.
Hey, Justin.
So, yes, go ahead.
Is there any way that you could maybe mute the sound on your laptop? We're getting a little bit of an echo.
Okay, does that help?
That helps a ton. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me, Brandy?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. So first and foremost, probably one of the most popular items is just going to be the weight training for the athlete. And one of the things I want to say from a strength conditioning perspective, the number one purpose or number one focus that I have as a strength conditioning coach, and that most strength conditioning coaches have, is to prevent injury, number one. Second to that comes improving strength and improving sports performance or on-field performance. So in leading up to this presentation, I took the opportunity to speak with a number of college strength conditioning coaches, college and high school strength conditioning coaches, and these are just some of the main principles that they came up with or that they suggested in our conversation. That mobility and technique has to come first over the absolute load that's being lifted. The number of coaches that I spoke to constantly talk about high school athletes that are coming up to the college ranks and are able to move lots of weight, but when you get them out of the weight room, they just have no mobility, no flexibility, and almost have to break them down and start from scratch as far as lifting technique. So especially to the young high school athlete or young college athlete, I would strongly emphasize learn the technique properly. Make sure that you reserve time for mobility and flexibility training, that you don't sacrifice mobility or technique just to be able to put 10 or 15 more pounds on the bar. Secondly, being able to use ground-based movements. As it says here, one of the famous coaches, Vern Gambetta, is who I heard this from, is that speed and power in sport is about one's ability to generate force into the ground. There's some very popular exercises out there that especially young kids love to do that you're not generating force into the ground. So as much as possible, try and pick athletic lifts that you're doing on your feet from a standing position. As Coach Reeve, the strength conditioning coach here at Wake Forest, as he kind of says, you want the lifts that are going to give you the most bang for your buck. That's going to activate the most muscles. That's going to be the most transferable onto the field. And then the last one, just multi-planar movements, forward, backward, lateral rotation, or in some cases anti-rotational. It's about being able to accelerate and decelerate in those different movements. Dynamic sport that it is, an individual is going to be put in many different positions, so you have to be able to generate that force and to stabilize your body in those different situations. So this is just a progressive category of some different exercises. As you can see on the left-hand side, the different developmental areas that kind of focus on different areas of the body. Total body power, hip extension power, hip extension strength, upper body push, upper body pull, and then you see the primary choice for those lifts, and then of course the secondary lifts or the variations. Now, as you see here, the Olympic lifts are included in here, but one of the things that I do want to emphasize is that the Olympic lifts are not going to be, they're not going to be for everyone, depending upon the athlete's ability or their training age or training experience. Not everyone is going to be able to safely execute some of those Olympic lifts. So as you can see in the far right column, coming up with some modest modifications for those exercises to where the athlete is still getting the same benefit, be it triple extension, be it upper body power, so forth, but in a much safer environment to their ability. So as far as the weight training sessions go, the timing of it is very important. A number of athletes that I work with and have kind of conversed with and interviewed, I find out that they're spending an hour and a half, 90 minutes, 2 hours in the weight room at a time, and that's overtaxing their body. So no weight training session should really exceed 60 minutes. Anything over and above that, you're really starting to decrease the benefit, and of course your movement efficiency is going to be jeopardized as well. So 60 minutes is especially my cutoff for all of my sessions. As far as frequency, in season, minimum of 2 sessions per week if your schedule allows that. Definitely no more than 3. And of course, in your preparatory periods throughout the year, whether you consider that your off season or your preseason, 3 to 4 days per week. Again, anything above and beyond that, you're really going to kind of jeopardize or impact the benefit that you're going to get out of those sessions. And then make sure you just have an accurate plan, whether it's for each day, whether it's for your week, whether it's on an annual basis. And we'll touch on the annual stuff here in a little bit. On the session, on the topic of the sessions, this is just kind of a general breakdown of how I structure my sessions. The different areas here, mobility, stability, speed, agility, and quickness. These are all different categories that I always try to include at least a little bit in every session. Now, again, like we said, on an annual basis or on a macro scale, the time that you spend on each of these topics is going to change. In a preseason setting, you might not spend as much on flexibility. You might spend more on speed, agility, and quickness, or on energy systems. whereas in the off season, immediately following the season, you might spend less time on your power explosiveness and less time on your strength, more on your stability and mobility. But again, you see the total breakdown comes to 55 minutes. And again, that could be adjusted depending on what time of the season you're in, and kind of what your goals and objectives are. These times would also need to be changed based on an injury and whether you're going through a rehab program with your athletic trainer. So what we have here is just a sample weekly schedule for, again, from the sample we use here at Wake Forest. And as you can see, the primary and the secondary lifts that we saw earlier with the progressions, this is kind of a breakdown of how you would spread that out over the course of a week, making sure that you still get your big lifts, the power cleans, the squats, the ones indicated with the asterisks, kind of disperse those out evenly throughout the week, and then of course fill in the rest of your training session with your secondary or your auxiliary lifts. Again, coming up with a good plan to make sure that you're touching on all those developmental areas to make sure that your body is fully prepared for training and for competition. And I think that's it for that's all I had for the weight training side. Any questions before we move on, Brandy?
No. I don't think we have any questions at this time. I'll let you know if we have any as we go on.
Okay, thanks. So moving on, energy systems development. This is also what a lot of us refer to as just general conditioning. These are two interesting quotes that I found when I was doing my master's degree. Or my master's thesis, two interesting topics that really kind of stood out to me that I felt like were great to share. Just that go a little bit further about the sport and about how to prescribe or how to consider our. I talk to a lot of athletes, especially at the high school level, and find out that their conditioning program consists of going on 5-mile runs or 5Ks or something like that. And of course, when you look at these statements here, you really realize that the sport is not one slow, consistent pace for a long period of time. As the first statement says, it's an intermittent, high-intensity sport. And of course, as it indicates in the second comment, the continuous play lasts an average of 45 seconds up to 2.5 minutes. So I think as coaches, especially, and for the head coaches too, we should try and structure our training sessions to match that as well. Think about activities and exercises that kind of mimic the game-like situations that players are going to experience on the weekend or during matches. One is stick to your objective. Whether it's to increase speed, whether it's to improve your endurance, or so forth. Whatever your objective is, stick with it. If it is speed training, train while you're fresh and fully recovered. Because just like an Olympic sprinter, they're not going to go out and do a weight session or do a sprint session the day before their event. They're going to stay as fresh as possible. They're going to make sure they're fully recovered. And of course, if your objective is to increase speed, never do that after a rugby session or after a weight session. As it says here, once your speed or performance decreases by 10%, your muscle recruitment is going to shift from fast twitch to slow twitch. So for instance, if you're doing a sprint session, as soon as your performance decreases by 10%, you're starting to shift into more aerobic based training. So, knowing what your maximum performances are, and being able to manage that throughout your conditioning sessions is critical to optimize your training. And just one thing to remember too, the only true sport specific training is to get out and to actually play the sport. and not just play it, but play it at game speed. Um, you know, touch is always a fun kind of social game, but whenever you compare it to an actual rugby match on a Saturday, a touch game is going to be far slower and far less intense than an actual rugby match. So just keep that in mind. You know, whenever you're coming out of preseason and getting ready, the only thing that's really going to get you rugby ready is actually playing rugby. You know, you can run any type of circuit that you want, but mimics the game 100%. It's not going to get you fully prepared for that. It'll get you. There are some things out there that can get you as prepared as possible, but is never going to be able to 100% replicate an actual game.
Justin, we have a few questions.
On the flip side of the workouts, yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay. First question. We have a coach that believes that our players should lift heavy at least 1 day a week during the season to maintain strength levels. I disagree. Please share your thoughts on heavy lifting days during the season.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and you know, a lot of that kind of comes down to the individual strength and conditioning coach themselves. You know, all of us kind of have our own philosophy, our own kind of mantra that we follow. You know, there are some studies out there that have shown performance benefits from lifting heavy 1 day a week. Now, a lot of it kind of comes down to how you specify heavy, and what the total volume is. If they're doing one set of squats for 3 repetitions at a heavy percentage, you know, that would be okay. Now, if they're doing 5, 6, 7 sets of squats, and then following that up with, you know, a heavy bench press session or a heavy deadlift session or something like that, that could really start to, you know, to impact the players' not only performance, but their ability to recover, whether it's for training or for a match. And then, of course, it also comes down to scheduling. You know, what time during the week is that heavy session taking place? You know, for a match on a Saturday, my opinion to that would be, if there was going to be a heavy session, it would take place on Tuesday, Wednesday at the possible latest. But again, it really kind of comes down to the players themselves and being able to manage them. What type of match are you coming off of? If you just came off your hardest match of the season, you might have to skip that heavy session the next week. If you had a bye week, the players might be able to handle that heavy session that following week. So, you know, it really comes down to scheduling and management.
Thanks. And then we had another question. Could you give us a quick example of a conditioning session?
Yeah, so one of, like I said, a lot of my conditioning sessions, we tend to make it as game specific as possible. If it's early in the season and we're not looking for a lot of contact or anything, we might try and use some sort of variation of, say, Aussie rules, to where you know, all the players are engaged. We're using a full field, so the players are having to cover a lot of distance. You know, anything that's going to kind of keep the ball in hand. Now, if it is a conditioning specific session, a lot of that's going to be based on what time of the year we're looking at. And let's see, I think we kind of touch on that a little bit later when we get to the rugby session part of the discussion. You know, but there's a lot of studies out there with the GSP monitoring systems now. It's really getting down to the specific distance that players are covering throughout the game. So trying to replicate those types of performances in a conditioning, a forward is probably only going to sprint a maximum distance of, say, 10 to 15 meters at most. So it doesn't really make sense for them to go out and run 100-meter sprints whenever they're conditioning. On the flip side of that, a back, you know, may sprint a maximum distance of 40 meters at a time. Certainly not much more than that. Very rarely, especially in 15s, are you going to see players making those 80-meter breaks. So, sticking with that model, I would structure a forwards and a backs conditioning session, and then just alter the rest periods in between. So if it was a backs session, doing 50-meter sprints, and if it was early in the preseason, start out with a minute rest, and then as you approach the kickoff to the season, you would just kind of reduce that rest period in between. So you're starting out with speed development early on, and then as you get closer to the season, you're able to kind of further develop their speed endurance a little bit. That way it is more closely matched to an actual game situation. Hopefully that answers the question.
I think we're all set. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So moving on, obviously the next topic is how we adapt from those weight training and those conditioning sessions. And these are just three examples right here of players that are recovering from their sessions. Obviously, the first one is the optimal situation, or the optimal scenario. That you've kind of adjust your training sessions to where you're peaking during that recovery phase. In the second one, is an athlete that's not allowing enough recovery time between their training sessions. So you're going to see that decrease in performance because their body's not able to adapt quickly enough or recoup for the next training. And of course, the very last one, no change in performance. Maybe they're doing just enough to stay where they're at, and they're not really getting that overload or progression to really see any performance gains. Obviously, hydration being a big part of the recovery process. So just something to keep in mind for the players. For every kilogram of body weight that you lose, whether it's from a lifting session, a conditioning session, a team training session, or even a match, for every kilogram body weight lost, you should replace that with at least 1 liter of water. Or to break that down to American terms, for every pound lost, you should replace that with half a liter of water. And the urine chart that you see on the right-hand side is something that a lot of universities use. They post it all over locker rooms, all over showers and bathrooms. So it's a constant reminder that players can kind of gauge where they're at, especially in August, September, when 2-a-days is coming back in, or even now as the spring is starting to come back in for a lot of the country right now, and the weather's starting to heat up. Is a real good time to kind of reemphasize that to the athletes. Then, of course, another area of recovery is on the sleep. As a lot of people say, 7 to 9 hours each night, especially for the students. Once you get to the college level, a little more flexible, but trying to get a 10 to 15 minute nap throughout the day, just an opportunity for your body to kind of rest and recharge a little bit. And by nap, it doesn't have to be that you're fully knocked out and snoozing. It could just be being able to lie down and just slow down. Maybe it's a breath session or a breathing session, and you're just kind of calming your breath and allowing your body to just relax and slow down a little bit. Just anything that's going to kind of give you the chance to recharge. And just maintaining consistency, having a regular routine, having a regular bedtime, waking up the same time every day, regardless of whether you have class or not. Keeping that consistency throughout is just going to help your body stay on the same routine, same schedule. And then as you get through the season, cross-training is a real advantageous tool to use, whether it's cycling, whether it's swimming. If it's in season, you definitely want to try and use some low impact modalities like the swimming, like the cycling. The number of, I think what we often forget as coaches and especially as players is, considering the number of sprints, the number of tackles, the number of jumps that players are executing, whether it's in practice or in a game. And then of course, especially for forwards, you look at the number of scrums that they're engaging, the number of rucks, and the number of mauls. All those are big power movements that we tend to overlook and should be considered. So make sure to take that in mind. Mix in some flexibility sessions as well, some recovery sessions, whether it is yoga or Pilates or something similar to that, just to make sure that you're giving your body that chance to. There's a lot of talk out there right now about hydrotherapy, about the use of ice baths. Also Normatex. And one thing I didn't mention here is the massage, using Normatex or using a hands-on masseuse. Also myofascial release, foam rollers, and those sorts of things. If you are an individual that can bear ice baths and bear the pain and the feeling that goes with it, be conscious of the time. This is definitely something that more is not better. So 5 to 10 minutes max. If you do have the opportunity to use contrast showers, contrast between cold and hot, and really manage that time. 1 to 2 ratio. So if it's 30 seconds cold, 2 minutes hot, 1 minute cold, 3 to 4 minutes hot. There's some contradicting studies out there, or some conflicting studies right now about that, about whether they actually do serve a purpose. But again, if it's one of those things that makes you feel better and you as an individual feel like you've improved your performance from it, then by all means, go for it. All right. And just what we touched on earlier about having an annual plan. This is just a spreadsheet that I created for an annual plan for a college team that's competing. As you can see, competes in 15s in the fall and 7s in the spring. And not saying that this is perfect by any means. It's a master plan, but one thing to keep in mind is first and foremost to be adaptable. That you see during the competition phases is maintenance is the primary objective. However, if at any point throughout that period, if we have a bye week, if we just had a difficult week, we had a game in the rain, or we're experiencing more injuries than we would hope, that's going to have to be adjusted. On the flip side of that, kind of in the transitional periods or in the off-season periods, making sure that the athletes or the team set time aside for recovery. As you can see in June and in December, there's a good 2 solid weeks that we really encourage the players to just get away, just relax, take that time as active rest. Get out and play other sports, whether it's basketball or soccer, snow skiing, those sorts of things. Just let your body kind of adjust, recover from what you just put it through over the last 3-4 months, and then slowly start to kind of build in during the preparatory phase, or what a lot of people would refer to as the off-season or the preseason phase. But regardless, just make sure that you have a plan for yourself. And then, of course, to the students, create that routine that we talked about. Look at your schedule, set time aside, know that you have class certain hours of the day. So schedule in time for your workouts, time for your recovery, time for your studying. You know when you're going to have those rugby sessions, your training sessions. So schedule all the time, all the things that are necessary around that. Again, nutrition will be touched on at a later point, but planning your meals and planning your pre and post workout nutrition, a key in making this a successful period for you as well.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
This goes back to an earlier slide. I apologize, but we had a
No.
question about ice baths. Is it necessary to submerge the entire body, or would most of the benefit be for the legs?
Um, yeah, from my experience, uh, you know, the primary benefit is going to be for the primary benefit of the ice bath is going to be to decrease the body temperature, the core body temperature as quickly as possible. That's kind of the primary uh, benefit. And then, of course, for the legs specifically, it's going to be to reduce blood flow, which is going to reduce the amount of swelling in those localized areas. Um, you know, it, in my experience, I've seldom come across individuals or coaches that have actually used full body submersion, um, and even less frequent. I've found athletes that are actually able um, to withstand it. So, um, you know, the lower body is definitely gonna give you the benefit that you need. The only thing I would say about the upper body would be if there's a particular injury to those areas. And again, I may be kind of speaking out of line here because that's going to be more on the medical or athletic training side of it. Um, but as far as upper body goes, I would say any icing to that area would be localized to a specific injury.
All right, that's it for questions for now, Justin.
Okay. All right. So just moving on to kind of address the coaches a little bit, how to incorporate some of this into your actual team trainings. I was recently asked to attend a couple of local high school team training sessions and matches, and then following that asked to present or create a presentation on team warm-ups. So that's where some of this information comes from. The biggest thing that I would suggest, especially to coaches, to young coaches or to coaches of youth teams, is try to avoid. I guess the common thing I see is taking a lap. Players, whether it's at the youth level or even at the senior level, they've been sitting in a classroom all day for the most part, staring at a computer or something like that. And you tell them to take a lap, and so they get in a group and they just go at a real slow jog all the way around the field and kind of come back, and to kind of revert back to what we were saying earlier about the game. The game is anything but a slow, consistent pace for a long period of time. So try to avoid that. If anything, your warm up should be short and dynamic. They should be specific to what your training objective is for that day, and they should be skill based. When I had the opportunity to work with national team strength conditioning coach Dave Williams, and one of the things that he strongly encouraged me is get the ball in their hand as soon as possible. Get them moving around, get them passing the ball, get them making decisions as soon as you can. During the warm-up, that's a time to re-emphasize technique, whether you're a coach that likes to use mini games or not. That's a time to really concentrate on your passing technique, on your running technique, even tackling or rucking technique. There's some small drills, whether it's in a game setting or not, that you can kind of re-emphasize those areas. And then, like I said, a lot of these athletes have been sitting at a desk or staring at a computer all day. So take that warm-up time to really wake their mind up, to get them moving, to get their minds kind of refreshed and thinking about what they have to do, making decisions, finding space, those sorts of things. Um, Doing very short games and transferring from one skill to the next during the warm-up. They have to constantly refocus on the next thing. So it forces them to kind of wake up a little bit. So again, like we said, know what your objective is. Whether it's more of a skill session and ball handling session, there's obviously some different things that you can do during the warm-up to emphasize that area. As you see, the player pictured at the top on the right is doing a single single leg pass. So you're starting to kind of incorporate that stability in the lower body, the balance, and then also the core stability that it's going to require to make that single hand pass. And at the same time, you're starting to readdress or reemphasize the passing skill. And the last one, contact. If it is going to be a heavy contact situation, a lot of wrestling or martial arts type drills are real beneficial for these areas. As you see the bottom picture, what I kind of refer to as a plank with disruption, sort of wrestling drills to where the players are in tight, like you saw in the first slide. It's a great opportunity to control the intensity and the impact that players are gonna endure early on. So just a quick example of how I would kind of structure a training warm-up, in a team setting. Again, like I said, keeping the time limit very short, where the players are kind of transferring from one skill to the next, and then kind of alternating that with some dynamic flexibility. As you see pictured on the top right, some inverted hamstring stretching, leg swings, arm circles. As you see, the middle picture, resisted running, getting the players prepped up. And then, of course, the example I have here kind of incorporates all the different skills, the ball handling, the contact, and the decision making. But if say it's a Thursday and it's a team run, then it wouldn't be necessary to really kind of incorporate any of the contact or any of the intense high speed running. So you might substitute something like that for maybe a unit based segment, for 1 to 2 minutes before you go into a team run. But again, like we said, it's short, it's specific, it's dynamic, and it's getting the players prepared for what they're about to go through. And then we touched on this a little bit earlier, but as far as rugby sessions and incorporating some conditioning into it, be creative, be game specific, and try and make it as game speed as possible. Make it competitive. That's going to make sure that players are engaged, that they're, staying involved with the activity. A lot of times, especially with younger players, as soon as you get them on a line and start running sprints, their mind is just going to shut off because they don't have to make decisions. They don't have to look for space. They don't have to evaluate. So again, from a coaching side, be creative. If you do want to incorporate some conditioning into it, maybe put a time limit on it. We're going to play a game for 2 minutes. We're going to rest for 30 seconds. We're going to play again. And you can adapt rules to those different games to ensure that everyone is staying involved, that someone's just not kind of camping out or hiding out on the corner and kind of shying away from the activity. And then we'll just kind of finish up with kind of some game day stuff, how to incorporate this or how to translate this into your actual game day routine. And again, like we said, the objective for your game day is to physically prepare your athlete for what they're about to go through, and to mentally prepare them for the strategies that they're going to have to execute and the skills that they're going to have to perform. One thing to keep in mind, just remember that every athlete in every position has to prepare differently. So don't think that a type 5 player should warm up or should prepare the same way that your back 3 or your wings or your fullback should prepare. Give them time to do their own individual warm up. Some players have a certain stretch, maybe it's superstition or maybe it's because of an injury. They have certain stretches or certain exercises that they like to go through before a game that's going to give them that extra confidence or something. Make sure to set time in that players can kind of do those stretches on their own. And here's just a brief schedule or skeleton of what a match day warm-up might look like. again, kind of counting down to kickoff, starting an hour before. And that's when the individuals have their chance to kind of do their own stuff. Give them 10 minutes of that, and then they go into more skill specific. And this is where your centers would work with your centers, your props with your props, your locks with your locks, and so forth. Incorporate some time where they get the unit work in, but at a very controlled pace. You don't want guys blowing out too soon and, being too fatigued before the kickoff even gets here. And then as you see the team warm up starting, barely just 20 minutes before kickoff. Again, keeping it short, keeping it concise, and we'll kind of go next into kind of a makeup of what that team warm up would look like. Just basically with this for match day, it's just that same team warm up that I showed for the training session. We just kind of expanded it a little bit, obviously, to incorporate a little bit more unit work, a little bit more teamwork. But again, keeping it short, letting the players stay focused for a very short period of time, then giving them a chance to back up, catch their breath, maybe get some water, some dynamic flexibility, dynamic activation, and then right back into it again. Work hard for 2-3 reps, and then get out. Some of these exercises, breaking them up into smaller groups and working for a short period of time, you're going to be able to increase the number of repetitions that they're getting. So you don't have players that are kind of standing in line waiting for a minute, 2 minutes just to get one rep. You want to ensure that they're getting maximum number of reps, to kind of prepare them for the match. Maybe they're starting to overtrain a little bit, and they're not taking enough time to allow their body to recover, or they're not, following the right steps to eat enough or to drink enough throughout the day in between. Also, there are some fitness tests that you can find, and obviously a lot of coaches have their own personal preference on which fitness tests they use. Some of them can be very short and very, very concise, that you can actually do them in the middle of the season. Take 10 to 15 minutes and test your athletes and see how are they doing from when the season started. Are they improving? Are they dropping off? If they are dropping off, that would bring up a red flag that, okay, hey, something's going on. Maybe he's injured. Maybe he's not eating right, something like that. One team that I've worked with used a vertical jump test, and every Monday morning, the athletes would perform a vertical jump and compare that to their preseason baseline. If that was dropping off, too far, if there was too much of a decrease there, that would kind of raise caution that, hey, maybe we need this guy to rest up this week a little bit more than usual. Maybe we'll pull him out of 30 minutes of practice just to make sure that he's getting that recovery that he needs. And of course, the last one is the RPE, or the rate of perceived exertion. and I've had the opportunity to work with a number of strength conditioning coaches at different levels that have used this. There's a couple of different formulas that you can use. The most simplest one is to record a player's rate of perceived exertion or their score, multiply that by the number that you train. So say, for instance, you have an hour-long training session, that's pretty intense, pretty high speed, and an athlete comes up and scores at a 7. So that would give that individual a score of 420 for that particular session. You can add those up throughout the week, and depending on how many training sessions you have or how long, that would kind of give you a score at the end of the week. And if one individual is significantly higher than the rest of the team, that would be a red flag to me that maybe they're overtraining a little bit. Or if they're significantly lower, maybe they're kind of in that phase to where they're not improving and they're not decreasing their performance. But there's a number of formulas out there and different kind of strategies on using RPE. But the biggest thing with RPE just comes down to communication with the athletes and them knowing their body, and of course you as the coach knowing your athletes and knowing what they're capable of and how they're responding. And that's it. So I mean, if Brandy, if you have any other questions, I'll certainly field those. And if anyone else at any other time has any questions, there's my email address and also a way to get in touch with me via social media. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
So it looks like we just have one more question. So you spoke about shorter, more targeted training sessions and activities. What is your opinion on building endurance in your players with some longer distance conditioning, such as timed 200, 400, and 800 meter runs and things like that?
As far as 200 and 400 runs, I think they have their time and their place throughout the year. That's for me personally. If I was going to incorporate those types of running sessions, that would be something I would do in what I refer to as the preparatory period, or what most people refer to as the off-season period. Those longer runs for me, I kind of look at what they're focusing on, what they're emphasizing, and for rugby, they're going to focus on speed endurance. So yeah, if I was going to use them personally, I would use them, like I said, very, very early in the training period, and then of course shorten that distance, the distance covered, as we got closer to the season.
All right. Thanks, Justin. I think that's all the questions we had for you.
Okay.
All right, so I think next up we have Tom Lyons, who's going to quickly go over some refereeing strength and conditioning. So I'm going to go ahead and change the presenter over to Tom. Give me a few seconds here. All right, Tom, you're up. If you want to unmute yourself and show your screen, we're all ready for you.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
You are good to go.
All right, and you're seeing that?
Yes, we can see your screen now.
Okay. So I'm Tom Lyons. I am a member of the U.S. National Panel. I've been a national panel referee since 2007, and prior to that, I played for a long time in the Super League and Division One. And currently, I'm an IRB educator. I'm a certified coach. I coach both at the youth and high school level. I've coached also collegiate and senior men. And I also have an IRB strength and fitness certification. But what I'm not is I'm not a medical doctor, and I'm not going to spend as much time talking about some of the science that Justin did. I don't want to repeat a lot of what he said. I think you'll find a lot of common themes. And what really the goal is to talk a little bit more practically about what are the kinds of things a referee particularly might be thinking about. But I think some of this is equally applicable to players, especially certain positions that mimic a lot of the referee movements. Probably the one exception being some of the power movements, the contact elements, obviously referees don't have. One thing I do want to say, and I think it's particularly important for a lot of referees who may have been a really active athlete at some point in their life and may have gotten away from that and may have found their way back into something like refereeing. It's really important. A lot of referees aren't necessarily 18 and running around every day. To consider before you get engaged in a new strength routine, a new exercise routine, making sure you're taking care of yourself first and making sure you're fit and fine to progress into something like that that's going to be harder and challenge you fitness-wise. So why do we want to talk about referee fitness? A fitter referee performs their job better, right? When you're fitter, when your oxygen uptake is stronger, when you are breathing less hard and your brain is well fed, you're going to make good decisions in a match. You're going to get to the places you belong in the match, and you're going to maintain that performance over the whole match. And I think, tapping into some of what Justin talked about, a game is not a single long continuous run. There was a recent study that Mike Cobb made available that suggested around those numbers that you see for referee activity in a game. 3 to 4 miles, 4.5, 5 miles, I've clocked in some very high-level matches. A high percentage of that, 50 to 60% may be relatively low-intensity activity, walking or jogging. The game might be sort of medium intensity, low level running, medium level running, and then maybe 10% is that higher level running. And as you can see, consistent with what Justin said about players, and ultimately referees are following the players, there's a lot of short sprints. Referees might be logging a little bit more yardage in those sprints because they're often moving past the breakdowns or into positions around the breakdowns, and the players are moving from breakdown to breakdown. But again, it really mimics what Justin was saying about the players. And just to echo that, I thought something that might be worth looking at. This is a graph of heart rate data from a game. And I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, but you can see right in here where the blue drops off. The blue is the speed, the pace of the athlete on the heart rate monitor. And that gap in the middle is basically halftime in the game. And as you can see here, both the pace of the athlete and the red line, which is their heart rate, it is up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down all through the game. And as you can imagine, looking at somebody who runs a 10K or a marathon, they're really probably running at a pretty steady pace, and their heart rate's probably moving at a pace that maybe is not quite as up and down. And the only variation you might see is maybe some hills or some surge at the end or things like that. And I think, we need to train for the game. Most of the time, referees are not lucky enough to be training as a team, so you're training by yourself. So, unfortunately, we'll talk about some things you can do as a group and some things you can do to tap into what Justin talked about, which is more sort of game-specific and mind-engaging activity. But a lot of times it's get out and do the fitness work. Rugby is not about running at steady state for 80 minutes. And certainly being a rugby echoes that. It requires us to develop both aerobic and anaerobic fitness. And what I mean by that is, aerobic is sort of that continuous endurance fitness, the long, slow run, and that anaerobic fitness is that high intensity demand that those sprints. So when I think about referee conditioning, I sort of think about it as being activity-specific conditioning, and that a long, slow jog isn't sufficient. It's better than nothing, and certainly if you're not doing anything, to get out and take a 20-minute walk or a 20-minute walk jog, or whatever it is that gets you moving is much better than doing nothing. But there are ways to improve upon that and put yourself in a better position for when you do go referee. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on some of these things, but I wanted to mention a few guidelines. Justin did talk about a lot of warm-up, that dynamic warm-up, really important, really essential part to being ready to train hard. Measure and record. Whether you're using a heart rate monitor, which are great, and now with GPS systems and heart rate monitor, they're measuring pace and heart rate and giving you really great graphical feedback, to just simply keeping a log of the time and the exercises you went through. It's really important. It helps you know where you are. It helps you measure your success, and it helps you think about what you need to do going forward. Injuries. Sometimes people don't think about referees getting injured, but stress injuries, overtraining injuries, you step in a hole in the field, you need to take care of the injury. You need to take care of yourself. That injury might take you out of a game for a week, or maybe an important game for a week, maybe for more than that, but not taking you out of a lot of games for a much longer period of time. Strength and core training, not something I'm going to talk about in here, but I really believe it's a really essential ingredient to success and to longevity. Justin could probably talk a lot about the body systems, that core strength, to somebody who's doing a lot of fitness work and a lot of conditioning work, is really quite important in the mechanics of what you do. So it's not something to ignore. And variation in cross training. And, there's, especially for folks who maybe, like myself, a little bit up there in age and not 20 years old anymore, taking some time on a bike instead of road work or track work is a great way to reduce some of the impact on old knees and ankles and feet. And it's also a great way just to put your mind to work on something different, whether it's swim or row or bike, elliptical. There are ways to make those tools successful for your training as well. So one of the things I think is really important is that as referees, you expand your training to be more than just going out for a long, slow jog. Include, yes, maybe some of those continuous running pieces, but interval and intermittent high activity or high intensity activities. So you might use that base run, especially in the outset of a season as you're preparing for a season, to start to build up some of that endurance, some of that aerobic strength that you need. But we're not talking about 5-mile, 10-mile runs. It might be 2 miles, might be a mile and a half, might be a mile, because you're at the beginning of your training cycle. One of the things I think is really important for people who are listening to this is everybody's got a different level that they're working at now, and you may need to adjust your program in intensity or adjust the program in some of the mileage based on where you are in it. But instead of just having one slow run, add an additional 20 or 30 minutes of higher intensity training. And I think this is something that's very in sync with what Justin was saying. Some of his sessions, 60 minutes is where he wants to be. In any of these sessions, I'm often 35, 40, 45 minutes is what you're committing to hard running. You're not going out and logging 3-mile or 3-hour runs on the road all afternoon. So what kinds of other activities besides that long, slow run? One of the things that you hear talked about just as a variation of that long, slow jog are what's called a fartlek run, which you can go to Wikipedia and look it up and read lots of. Basically, it's taking what is your long run and every other telephone pole or every 2 telephone poles deciding that between there and the next telephone pole you're going to do, a 75% sprint instead of a jog, or every time you see a red car, you're going to run for the next 10 seconds. It's just an interesting and variable way to shake up a run to include both the sort of low intensity jog part of the run and a higher intensity speed part of the run that will introduce more stress into the anaerobic part of the run. You can do more structured intervals. So you can go on the road or track or even field where you're doing run, jog, walk cycles around a field. I've certainly seen plenty of teams run different cycles of that. You can get out on a track and run a lap, walk a lap, run another lap, walk a lap. And especially for those who haven't been doing a lot of training, it's an interesting way to start to bring yourself back into some level of fitness without feeling like you're overwhelmed and you just killed yourself on a Sunday afternoon. The other thing that you need to introduce is a lot of the speed, agility, and quickness training techniques are really adaptable to what we do as referees. One of the things that I do like is some of the longer intervals, although they're not necessarily specific. I'm not necessarily using these as a suggestion to train people to be faster, but it's about building speed endurance. Shorter interval training where you're doing repeats of maybe 40 or 50 meter sprints. And then one of the key things is an active recovery. As you get stronger in your active recovery, instead of adding 10 more sprints, it might be that the active recovery transitions from a walk to a jog or longer interval training. And sometimes where my training might change a little bit is from 15s to 7th season. Where in 15s, a lot of those sprints are short. In 7s, you may have more long sprints that you're dealing with. So some of the training for this type of activity might change. I might incorporate more long interval training in the beginning of 7th season. Some of the great things that I think fit very well in the season, and they are close to what that referee has demands on in their game. Progressive sprint ladders, where you can set out for yourself cones at 5, 10, 15, 20, or 10, 20, 30, 40 meters. And it's 5, 10 meter sprints where you sprint out 10 meters, jog back. You can put it on a watch, give yourself a certain amount of seconds, and you might consider something like doing these on maybe a 30-second cycle, where each 10-meter one is on a 30-second cycle. You have a nice rest in between them. As you accelerate up in length, that 30 seconds stays the same, so you've got to work harder. And then you come back down the ladder again. Sprint shuttles, where you use just a 20-meter shuttle run, and you burst out the 20 meters, turn around and come back. For those who are looking for a lower impact exercise where you're not pounding to a stop to turn around, you can do the same thing, but do it as a continuous run, say around a track, where you're cycling every 20 seconds into a new sprint. The intensity of that might get harder by adding a few more sprints, but it also can get harder by dropping the cycle to 18 seconds or 19 seconds or 17 seconds. A lot of people talk about doing hills as a strength, sprint strength tool. I like hills. What I would strongly suggest is, especially for those who are not that experienced, is you gradually introduce uphill sprints into what you do. Unless you're a very experienced runner and putting a lot of time into this, I would stay away from downhill sprints unless you really are working hard to learn what you're doing and how you're doing it. But hill sprints can be, it's the same thing as a flat sprint, but you're doing repeats on an uphill. And an interesting way to build strength and speed endurance again. A whole variety of shuttles. You can use speed test cycles, the plain old-fashioned suicide if you're working inside or outside, where you're doing suicide type runs. Again, I wouldn't run them for 5 minutes. What you're looking for is short bouts of intensity with an active recovery. And by active recovery, it means you walk, a slow jog, you're doing something. Lots of interesting track sessions you can do. Surge, sort of walk-run intervals, or really run-walk intervals, where you might do a 100-meter run with a 700-meter walk, 300-meter run, 500-meter walk, 500-meter run, 300-meter walk, 700-meter run, 100-meter walk. Or if you're going for more mileage, you introduce more cycles into that. And in between each one of those cycles, you have a small active recovery. You might do 200-meter repeats, track repeats, maybe 100 meters or 400 meters. Again, these are geared to sort of building that speed endurance. And I think another key element is the short speed and agility work. Angle in out sprint movements. So what I mean by that is you may lay out a cone pattern where you run out 7 meters and come back 3 meters, out another 7 meters and back 3 meters. And if you think about a referee movement or movement in a game, often you're following the pick and drive by the forwards, or a small ball, a short pass into the forwards or into the fly half. You're going with that for 5 meters. You're coming back to resetting the offsides line, attacking up the field again with the attacking team, and then maybe finishing with something a little bit longer that takes you out 10 or 15 meters to maybe a ball that goes out to the backs. The last suggestion is what I saw called my alphabet soup shuttles, where you take a simple sort of grid pattern that may be no wider than a 5 meter by 5 meter or a 7 meter by 7 meter box. But if you think about what a W or an M looks like, or even an X, referee movements, we move at a lot of different angles, sometimes moving backwards, moving angled backwards, moving side to side shuttles. We go forward, we come back, and you can mimic those movements in a small shuttle grid and use that as those bursting movements of 5 or 7 meters that also mimic the movements you're making during a game. You can use those in a repeated fashion where you're doing 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. And for those of us who've been at sports for a long time, these are things that you can mix and match to make your sessions sort of interesting, change them up a little, and get to some of the things Justin was talking about, which is sort of get your brain going a little bit so you're not doing the same old boring thing every day. I think that it can be really valuable to use that variation in training, and to use those things like bike and swim and row for low impact work. Just as sort of a little summary, periodization, Justin talked a little bit about it. I think, I'm not going to really go into it, but it is really important for part of a successful training plan. And, I think I sort of mimic some of the things he said, which in season, especially as you get further into, we're well into a spring season now, and we're going to get further and further into it, and maybe even some weekends where as a referee you're doing a Saturday and Sunday playoff game and playoff matches and things like that in different parts of the country. Your training probably moves from it's 2 to 3 times a week, and plus a rugby game, that means you're out 3 or 4 times a week for a good run. Maybe in the preseason you're pushing a little bit more for 3 to 4 times a week, and you have to think about what kinds of activities you have planned in those sessions. Later in the season, your sessions might get shorter in mileage, but up a little bit in intensity. So you're not on your feet as long, but you're getting good work out of it. Measure and record. Said that at the beginning. Train with others to help push performance higher. Not only does it help you push your performance higher, and that might mean, a lot of referees are coaches, a lot of referees some even still play. So go play touch with that group who gets together to play touch, especially in the off season. It's a great way to get some exercise in, to do something besides just a run, to get the ball back in your hands. Do some of those warm-up drills and non-contact drills with the college team or the high school team that you coach, and do them well. It'll help the players ultimately to have somebody who's doing it fast, and it'll help you get some extra training in. Or train with other referees. I'm in Washington, D.C., and over the past 6 or 7 years in the off-season, we've been lucky to have a small group get together often on Saturday mornings, and we have all sorts of little training things we can go through. And some of that incorporates what Justin mentioned about small decision games for players. Referees need the same thing. Referees are making hundreds of decisions, and even simple things like running at a man who's pointing in a direction to the next cone you're going to go to means your brain is processing something at the same time your muscle systems are being stressed. We'll do relays with the ball in hand just to have something else to do besides run. And sometimes it's more fun to run with other people. As I mentioned earlier, strength and core training is part of the package, and it's an important part. Certainly, you may not need to do a ton of Olympic lifts, but you also don't necessarily need to be in a massive gym to get some strength and core training in. Sit-ups, push-ups, some dumbbells, an exercise ball. You can get a lot done to at least maintain a minimum set of strength and core work. Planks and sit-ups and a million things that you don't need an expensive situation to do. You just need to put a little time into it. Lastly, I I always mention to people something called a dog run, and that is sometimes I think even though I say above measure and record, it's really actually very nice to just take off your watch and go for a run and run out as far as you want to run and do a fartlek run, do a sprint run, go run through a hotel lobby and see what people do and come out the other side of the hotel. Go out for a run for fun. I mean, nobody ever strapped a GPS onto a dog and said, run 10 miles. Dogs go and run because it's fun and they want to feel the wind on their face. And sometimes we need to remember the stuff we do should be fun. So that was quick, and since we're wrapping up after a long night, I hope that was good. Certainly, questions are welcome, or if people would like to talk on more specifics, I'm happy to do that. Answer questions now, and that's it.
Great, thanks, Tom. Looks like no one's typed in any questions, but I did want to share with the group that we will be posting all of these presentations online at the Rugby U webpage, which is usarugby.org/rugbyu. Or if you want, you can reach out to me at bmedran@usarugby.org with any questions, and I can direct those questions to the correct presenter. So thanks again, Tom, and thanks again everyone else that presented today, and I hope everyone has a great night. Thanks.